Hello, my name is Danielle Elizabeth. Thank you so much for the opportunity to hear more about the rebuild. The rebuild is actually something that was really birthed out of my own healing journey. And as I've gone through certifications in trauma recovery and doing my master's at Tyndale University in clinical counseling, it has just become an entire program that helps walk someone through their healing journey. So, I just wanted to take the opportunity to briefly give an overview of each of the sections that we go through in the rebuild. The rebuild is actually following the analogy of building a house. And so sometimes when we're building a house, we actually have to tear down or we actually excavate before we can actually rebuild on a solid foundation. I'm just going to share my screen with you as I walk you through this different phases that we go through as we're on this healing journey. And this is what I walk people through, whether it is a one-on-one coaching program or it's a group program. We follow this same program. So, like I said, sometimes you need to excavate, but actually, the first thing we need to do is gather our tools. We need all the tools and strategies and skills in our toolbox to actually rebuild. What this looks like on a tangible aspect is actually working with our nervous system. So, from a bottom up approach or a body up approach, you might have heard the terms fight, flight, freeze, or fawn before. And what actually happens is our bodies have this stress response that is supposed to keep us safe. But what happens is as stressors come, these responses get triggered and it stops us from being able to live in a healthy way. And it also stops us from being able to dig into deeper healing. So many of our mental health symptoms are connected to these fight, flight, freeze, or fawn states. And so the first thing we do is create stability and safety within our body and within our nervous system before we do anything, before we get started. So, like I said, sometimes we actually need to excavate so that we can end up building on a solid foundation. So, the first phase of the journey is in this tear down process. So, it's the excavation. What this looks like in what we're actually doing is we are looking at different beliefs and implicit messages that have been on replay since our childhood, since traumatic things might have happened. We also look at intergenerational trauma and help connect the dots to the past, even in our family, to the struggles that we're having today. And we look at attachment in this section. So then we have the debris removal. At this stage, we want to remove things from what we just uncovered in the first phase of excavation. So that looks like grief work. Grief is an integral and crucial part to our healing. We also remove the shame based systems that are at play. Shame is such a debilitating part of a trauma survivor's life. And here we actually bring in the spiritual aspect of it. As Christians, we know that there is an enemy, that there is a spiritual realm that is playing a role in our mental health, in our day to day life. And so it is very important that we also shut those doors of areas that can be negatively impacting us. So the next phase is restoration. Before we actually rebuild, we need to restore what was good. We're not all bad. Even someone who's experienced so much trauma is not all bad. What this looks like is looking at our needs and our wounds and bringing healing into resolving those emotional wounds. It looks like doing forgiveness work and also bringing Jesus into it yet again, which are doing this entire process. But this is where we go through inner healing prayer. We look at what someone has gone through and how we can bring Jesus into the journey to help heal those painful memories and those painful parts of our story. So then finally, we get to rebuilding. So the rebuild process is actually also multiple steps. So we look at our footings, we have build a foundation, and then we frame up walls and put on a roof. So our footings are actually Jesus. He is our footings, our relationship with him, our connection with him, our dependency and recharging in him. These are all things that we work on as we are building our foundation. Then we have our foundation is the very practical things that we need in our life on a day-to-day and a weekly basis that keep us operating in the most healthy way possible. So there's a bunch of them, but a few examples are getting adequate sleep, moving our bodies, nutrition, having purpose, self-care, lots of things like that, that just create that very stable foundation with our footings with Jesus to help us build on something solid. Then we go into framing, and this is really the meat and potatoes of the program. So there's 4 sections in the frames. It's 4 walls of this structure that we're building. And so it's reparenting, relationships, regulating our emotions, and resources. So reparenting is really coming alongside with Jesus and reparenting those different parts of ourselves, like our inner child, our outer child, and our critical parts of ourselves, to help us integrate back into the person that Jesus actually created us to be. The next thing we look at is relationships. So many people who have experienced trauma experience interrelational trauma. So that is trauma within relationships. And unfortunately, we live in a world with so many broken people, with people bleeding their wounds all over each other. And so what we look at in this section is how to keep ourselves emotionally safe, no matter who we're dealing with. So maybe we do have toxic people in our life, but how we are going to have boundaries, learning about trauma bonds, learning about the drama triangle, learning about codependency, and how that all relates into the relationships that we have in our life. Then we look at regulating our emotions, how to be able to feel our emotions without numbing, without avoiding them, but also where are our triggers? What does trigger us? And working with our triggers so that we have the knowledge to be able to live in a life that is going to trigger us without falling apart. And then the last section of this is the resources. So I've developed something called the healing exercise. The healing exercise is something that actually brings all of this together. It's a daily exercise that we do that not only helps us get to the root cause of the problem, but actually gives us an empowerment of what we can actually do to help ourselves heal our trauma, but also on a day-to-day basis. And then the last part is the roof. And the roof is our identity. It's who we are as a child of God, and learning how to stand in confidence in that, learning how to love ourselves while denying ourselves, learning how to have self-confidence without pride, and really being able to walk out of this journey as the woman that God created us to be. So I know that was just a very, very brief overview, but I really appreciate you watching it. I would love to be able to help anyone in your congregation or your life who is on a healing journey, who needs more guidance and more support, and someone who has a faith-based perspective who's going to bring Jesus into proven healing modalities that also help. The goal is to integrate these worlds of psychology and Christianity together so that someone is on this healing journey that is aligned with their beliefs, but also getting results in helping them overcome their trauma, overcome their past, and overcome the debilitating symptoms of anxiety and depression and more that so many people are struggling with in their mental health. If this is something that you think could help anyone in your congregation or life, I would love to book a call and get to know each other more. There's links in the email that I sent you to book a time. There's also links in this on this page as well. And I hope to talk to you soon.